This is TWiT.
Flo, we have an email, and this is a cool email because I think it really speaks to a lot of the people who watch this show and are fanatical about Tasker.
It's normally a tip. This is actually a tip from one of our watchers named Sean. So Sean wrote in or maybe listener. As a longtime Android user, the first application I install when moving from one device to another is Tasker. I have several tasks that I've created and have helped tremendously in the automation of my phone and would go as far as to say my life. One function I use involves Tasker sending me an SMS message to alert me an event, such as when my phone is charged so I don't leave it connected to a power source, helping to extend the life of my battery. I receive the message on my smartwatch. Apparently, Google is making changes to how apps access and handle SMS and call permissions. I'm all for better security on Android. However, in this case, this change will negatively impact how I use, and I'm sure how others use, Tasker. Because of these changes, starting in January, Tasker will no longer be able to access or handle SMS messages and calls. I'm sure you have viewers that use Tasker, and I hope that providing awareness to this issue will result in Google reconsidering their decision that Tasker is ineligible to access these permissions. Now, if we recall correctly, this whole thing happened because Google's been trying to protect its users, but I do remember that when that was announced, a lot of people had cited Tasker being one of the things that would eventually fall a little bit in feature usage, at least for the people who've really relied on it for those like precise formulas that they made. So it's just something to keep in mind. That's
a bummer. Yeah. So basically, the change specifically is that so obviously they're cracking down on phone and SMS permissions. Yeah. The only apps that are allowed to set a user's default, only apps that are allowed or set as a user's default can actually make that specific request once this change is made. So therefore, because Tasker is not like a replacement dialer or a replacement messaging app, it could no longer request those actions, request those permissions to phone and SMS. And obviously that makes things more secure, right? That not every app can request those. It's only apps that you would actually set as a user to be your default dialer or default messenger. But that's going to essentially break a large portion of what Tasker has been for many years. They're working on an update to Tasker that will no longer have those features baked in. That's going to probably roll out in January. They say unless Google changes this. I'd be really surprised if Google changed this. As the developer on the show, and like, yes, we're going to throw it to you again. I mean, this has got to be, I imagine, kind of a nightmare scenario in some ways for a developer, right? You've built this highly successful app. People use it. And especially this app is so customizable and everything modular. And then suddenly a big change is made to the OS, the underlying infrastructure of the OS, that is going to break your app to a certain degree, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's always a danger. And especially so I think that often as a developer, there's kind of a class of permissions that you kind of understand are very, they're very, obviously they're very security impactful permissions, like SMS, like phone. Mm-hmm. And generally speaking, I mean, I know that, so I'm not a Tasker user, so I apologize, like if I'm a little off the point here. But like it is tough. And a lot of times as a developer, if you try to kind of reduce your usage of really highly impactful, kind of like highly security impactful things. Like I know like a kind of like a very common sin that a lot of developers had is to use like the device ID as like an ID for the user. Mm-hmm. Like I've heard of lots of apps doing that. And that's generally that's a bad idea. And that they were actually encouraging us not to do that. That was like one specific thing that Google had a kind of security centric talk at the Android Dev Summit last year. And they're encouraging us to not do that. And like, even at, like at my company and other places I've worked at, there's always a push internally to kind of move towards more kind of privacy centric practices, but it does make life harder as a developer. And I mean, that's kind of like the trade-off, is that the more power the user gives you as a kind of like agent on their phone, the more you can do for them. But also if you're a bad actor, or if you're a bad actor, that also gives you the power to do really bad things. And so I think that erring on the side of like Tron, fighting for the user, is a good thing. and that unfortunately it does mean that will handcuff or kind of, obliterate features for us as developers. It's kind of, I feel like, and I know this sucks. This is not a good answer. This is not something that's going to make a user feel better at night, but it's kind of just how mobile is. And I feel like there's a lot of things that start out open on Android, or that, were kind of just decisions that were made before that were probably overall in terms of like the net positive of the world of all mobile users were bad things, and that they're trying to alleviate. But that means that some things like Tasker, who are like good actors who do have very good functionality to offer their users, kind of get caught in the crossfire, as we're trying to move everyone towards like a better, more private world, which we need. But it's kind of just SHIT happens. Can I say that? Like,
yeah.
Can I say
you're saying letters?
You just did. Yeah.
But it's kind of those things. You have to be aware of those things when you access APIs that are kind of very intense, that require permissions like that. You kind of take a risk, and my love and sympathy goes out to Tasker users, because I know as a developer how much that sucks.